Hello, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Douglas Johnson. I am a yoga teacher at the advanced 500-hour level. I am an ordained minister, musician, and kirtan artist, amongst other things. And today I wanted to talk about using feelings as a guide. Can we trust our feelings? Can we trust our emotions? What are we supposed to do with them? Are we supposed to listen to them? Are we supposed to ignore them? And I'm going to explore this from the perspective of deep spiritual teachings, not from a Western science or a psychological perspective. Before I get into the talk, however, I do want to thank my patrons on Patreon. They are the community that allow me to create these talks and post them without a paywall of any sort, which is how I like to work. I don't really like the idea of a paywall for spiritual teaching, and yet spiritual teachers, communities, they need funding just like anybody else to survive in this world. So I like the idea of having all the content free. And then those who feel called can help support the teaching as they feel they want to, or as their means allow them to. So if you'd like to become a part of that community, check out the links below. You can also help out by making a one-time contribution via PayPal or Venmo. You can also help by purchasing merch. There's some links at the beginning and end of this video to my shop, where I've created with my friend some merch that you can get, Mahapatha Yoga merch. And then finally, if you're on YouTube, you can help a lot by liking, subscribing, sharing, and commenting. Okay, so let's get into our talk for today. Love or fear, how to use feelings as a guide. Now, I do want to mention that this may not be exhaustive, and there may be other ways of approaching this. And honestly, things can change, but this is my current thinking on the topic, and it's based around some teachings and teachers that I have studied, as well as my own personal experience on this path. So can we trust our emotions? This is an important question. I read a book recently where the author was basically saying emotions are vestiges of biological programming designed to keep us alive. So basically, they inspire us to do certain actions that, again, help keep us alive, help us procreate, help us get food, help us get sex, help us stay oriented in the community in a way that's advantageous to us or our genes, okay? And so from their perspective, emotions are pretty much to be ignored. They didn't feel that they provided much value or guidance. Basically, they're an ancient guidance system that were tuned to a situation and scenario that we no longer live in. So basically, ignore your emotions was more or less what they were saying. So this is one perspective, ignore your emotions. They aren't useful or helpful. To others, this is a rather popular view today. Emotions are the only thing. You should be guided by your emotions. That's the main thing that you should use to decide what and what not to do. Does it feel good? Does it not feel good? How does it make you feel? This kind of thing. And then some believe that there are certain emotions that should be ignored, and then other emotions should be listened to. So, for example, maybe feelings. I'm kind of using the word emotions loosely, and feelings. So feelings of laziness, of sloth, of greed, of fear. These may be emotions that we should not listen to. And then feelings of love, of faith, of peace. These are things that we should listen to, okay? So these are just some examples of people's attitude towards feelings. Interesting question is, have you ever examined your own ideas about feelings? How do you treat your feelings? If you feel bad, do you immediately assume that something bad is happening? If you feel good, do you immediately assume that, oh, this must be the greatest thing ever, okay? So again, I'm not saying that there's an absolute right or wrong here, just saying, have you ever considered it? Do you treat all emotions equally? Are you motivated by your emotions, or do you tend to, again, see them as hindrances to maybe getting what you want? So listening to or ignoring emotions will undoubtedly have a very different effect on our lives. But what does deep spirituality have to say about our emotions? Can we trust them? Should we listen to them? Should we ignore them? Well, I have 3 teachings that have been important to me, 3 teachers, if you will, and I want to share these perspectives with you, and I think they align fairly well. So I think they give us a guide in terms of deep spiritual teaching. And I do want to draw a distinction here between spirituality and religion. So religion, for me, is a belief system, and it can be mixed with some spirituality, but spirituality really, for me, isn't about a belief system. It really is something different, okay? All right, so Joseph Campbell, who was a famous mythologist, he studied myths from all around the world, and I think he was a very spiritual individual, but he didn't have religion. He didn't have a belief system. He basically would explore different myths from around the world, and I think that led him to wisdom. I think it gave him a very, very unique perspective on how to live a engaged, happy human life. So one of his more famous quotes or teaching was, "Follow your bliss." And how he came to this teaching, I think, is rather interesting. He got it from an Indian or Sanskrit word, Sat Chit Ananda. So Sat Chit Ananda means truth, consciousness, and bliss. So this is sort of like the enlightened state. And he heard this teaching, and he did a very interesting thing. He said, I don't know that I know what the truth is. And to be honest with you, I'm with him. I don't know that I know what the truth is. My experience of it is it's beyond words. So it's not really something we can put into words. But even still, I don't necessarily know what it is. I think I've experienced truth, but I don't think it's what we tend to think of it as. And the facts are different than truth for me. So he said, I don't know that I know what truth is. He said, consciousness, I'm not sure. But he said, I do know what bliss is. I do know what brings me bliss. And so he lived his life following his bliss. That's kind of his quote, his mantra, his idea is follow your bliss. And he believed that would bring you your dharma, your path, that was your path, even if it was tough. And trust me, following your bliss is not the easiest or safest thing to do. It can be quite challenging. But here we see him saying, yes, you can trust your bliss, basically. And it's very simple, but I think it's very elegant, and it can be quite effective. So are we following our bliss? So this is one teaching can we trust our feelings? Well, what brings you bliss? And you can follow that. Now, I do want to make a point here that bliss isn't the same thing as pleasure, because pleasure, following your pleasure is called hedonism. And this is a little different than following your bliss, okay? All right, so the next teacher or teaching I want to highlight here in this exploration is the work of Byron Katie. And she basically says, feeling a negative emotion indicates you're believing a thought that's not true, as believing in stressful thoughts leads to suffering. So she is equating negative emotion with suffering, and she's basically saying, if you're suffering, you're believing something that isn't ultimately true, okay? So again, you have to go a little deep for this. So if you're like, well, I'm suffering because my wife left me, there's all kinds of assumptions in that you may not be unpacking, okay? So you're thinking you're suffering because your wife left you, but really you're suffering because you're afraid you're going to die alone. And so you thought that your wife would be by your side when you die or whatever, and actually now you're afraid you're going to die alone or live the rest of your life alone. And the truth is, we don't know if that's true or not. So you have to go beyond surface appearances, you know, certain facts, and look deeper into the psychology of it. And for Byron Katie, you do that with the work. So she has 4 questions and a turnaround. Basically, is it true? The thought, you know, I'm going to die alone, is it true? Are you absolutely sure it's true? Because a lot of people just say, yes, it's true. And then you have to look a little deeper. A lot of times you find, well, maybe it's not true. Then who are you with that thought? Who are you without that thought? And then turn it around. And there are various ways of turning it around. I don't want to get into teaching the work today. There are many videos online and all kinds of resources that Byron Katie has created for that. But that would be her way of exploring that. Okay, so again, negative emotions are to be dealt with, according to her, but really not acted upon. They're really not guidance on how to act in the world. They are rather guidance that we need to look deeper. And then the final teaching is from A Course in Miracles. And A Course in Miracles basically says you are capable of 2 basic emotions. All right, I know we, have different words for different things, but basically A Course in Miracles says positive and negative emotion, and it breaks it down into love or fear. That basically everything you're experiencing is broken down into one of these 2 emotions. Then it goes on to say that one leads to heaven and the other leads to hell. All right, so in other words, if I listen to love and I follow love, which I'll remind everybody, very similar to the idea of following your bliss, right? So Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss. We're here, following love leads to heaven. And then following your fear, listening to fear, letting fear guide you, leads to hell. And it says you're always, in any moment, experiencing one or the other, but you can't experience both. And so this is a concept that you really need to look at, because a lot of people will say things like, I love you, but I'm afraid X. So what the Course is telling us, that's not really, you're not experiencing love when you're experiencing fear. Okay, so I love you, but I'm afraid you're going to leave me, so therefore I want XYZ. That's a good example of being motivated by fear, not love, right? Because I love you, but I'm afraid. The but I'm afraid part really tells us we're being guided by fear. Okay, so I love you, just the pure, I love you, no, but I'm afraid kind of thing. And this is a really good lesson for a lot of parents, because a lot of parents, they love their children and they bring a lot of fear into the relationship. All right, so based on my studies of these three teachings, I think we can find a little bit of guidance here. A trend emerges, and I would summarize this as listen to love, bliss, positive emotions, and see negative emotions as an indication that you are not seeing reality as it is, and you need to investigate your thoughts and assumptions a little more deeply. Okay, so it's not quite ignore negative emotions. It's more that a negative emotion is an indicator that you are confused mentally and that you need to fix your outlook. You need to do some inquiry, spiritual inquiry. You need to read some more scripture, study with a teacher, do some more practice, clean up your perspective. Okay, so again, you can follow positive emotions, love, and fear you want to use to inquire deeper. You don't want to be motivated by fear, okay? This is what the teaching is pointing us to. So I want to get a few things straight because I think it can be easy to be confused here. And so one is pleasure is not positive emotion. Pleasure is pleasure. And I don't think any spiritual teacher in their right mind would recommend that you just follow what's pleasurable. So there is a philosophy of following pleasure that's called hedonism. And hedonism was what was prevalent at the height of the Roman Empire, where we hear about, orgies and people eating whole meals and then vomiting so they could eat again because it was pleasurable. And maybe there's someone out there who advocates for that, but I don't really know of a spiritual teacher that advocates for that. So while spiritual teaching might advocate for following your bliss, it's not really advocating for following your pleasure. All right, so just because I eat chocolate cake and I feel a lot of pleasure, that does not mean I should eat more chocolate cake. In fact, sometimes in our culture, we use the word bliss for pleasure, right? Oh, this chocolate cake it's just blissful. Okay, but we need to be a little more nuanced than that. So pleasure is not bliss, pleasure is not love, pleasure is pleasure. And generally, the spiritual teachings that I follow recommend you don't need to be afraid of pleasure, because some people go to that extreme too. They say, oh my God, pleasure is, of the devil and it's going to corrupt me and I have to avoid it at all costs. So I need to live in a cave with no pleasantries and really bland food so I don't experience pleasure. It's not necessary, okay? But we can't chase after pleasure either. So that's different than following your bliss. Following your bliss can lead to a lot of pain, actually, if you're really doing it. So if your bliss is to be an artist, you may live your whole life starving, like many famous artists have. And it's only after they were dead that their legacy was recognized. But during their lifetime, they basically lived in poverty. So is that something you consider pleasurable? Most people don't. And yet these are people that followed their bliss, okay? So we're not talking about hedonism. And in yoga, there's a teaching where they talk about yoga, boga, and roga. So yoga is realizing your highest potential as a human being. Boga is pleasure, and roga is physical and mental maladies and suffering. And basically the teaching is if you follow yoga, the highest, you get boga, pleasure. okay? You enjoy yourself. So again, the teaching is don't chase pleasure, let it come to you by pursuing your highest yoga, all right? The teaching then goes on to say that if I pursue pleasure, boga, I get roga, which again is mental maladies, physical and mental maladies and suffering, all right? So pursuing boga, a good example of this is basically substance abuse or addiction. An alcoholic gets pleasure from drinking alcohol, so they drink more and more of it until they end up with fatty liver disease, or they end up on the streets, poor in poverty. They end up mentally deranged, whatever it might be. Okay, that's just one example. There are many other examples of that, but following pleasure is not the way from a spiritual perspective. Okay, so again, following your bliss is not the same thing as following your pleasure. Now, the other thing I want to make clear here is the teaching that we should not follow fear or negative emotion does not mean we repress it or ignore it or hide it, okay? So the idea here is a negative emotion, it's like an indicator light on a dashboard. It's telling you something is wrong under the hood. What is the hood? That is your mental and emotional life, something inside of you, okay? So a fear, a strong negative emotion, strong reaction to a situation is telling you something, again, like Byron Katie says, you're confused. You're confused about the true nature of reality, about yourself and about existence. So you need to do inquiry of some sort. Again, she has a whole method, but there are other methods of inquiry as well. But you need to look deeper into those thoughts. You can do that on your own if you know what you're doing, or you can do that in conjunction with a teacher, okay? An experienced teacher who knows how to do that. So we're not trying to resist negative emotions or fear. We're not trying to pretend like they're not there. We're not trying to ignore them. Rather, we see what they are, and then we do not allow them to motivate us, right? Because again, I might feel negative emotion and then be like, well, I need to call my partner and break up with them because I feel bad, or I need to quit my job because I feel bad, or whatever it might be. So instead of doing that, we look a little bit deeper. We inquire, what am I believing about this situation, about reality? Okay, so it's, again, we're not ignoring it. We just don't want to be motivated to take action based on that. Okay, so clearing up these misguided emotions is basically a two-step process. So I already mentioned one of them, which is inquiry. So again, asking questions in a meditative setting or state, not of the mind. We're not trying to intellectually figure anything out. We're wanting these answers to come from a deeper place. And then the second part is being with the emotions, the feelings in the body. So it's really the body that tells us whether a feeling is positive or negative, right? Does it feel good in our body or not? Usually what we call negative emotions, quote unquote negative emotions, are contractions that are felt in the viscera of our body, kind of in the torso here. So examples might be a clenching in the throat. Another example might be an aching in the heart. Another example might be butterflies, or a feeling of heaviness in the gut, okay? So these are generally what we would call negative emotions. And again, we might describe them as fear or nervousness or any number of negative emotions. Now, I know some people get triggered by the idea of negative emotions. They're like, no such thing as a negative emotion, yada, yada, yada. That's fine if you have that perspective. I'm just using the word in a way that I hope gets the point across. Whether negative emotions are really negative is a different story. And from my perspective, they aren't, because again, is an indicator light on the dashboard negative or bad? No, it's telling you something. So this is really how, on a mature spiritual path, we want to view the negative emotions, is they are indicating or telling me something, that something needs to be investigated. They aren't necessarily telling me that I should do or say something in the world. Okay, this is one of the big points I wanted to make in this particular talk. So again, should I be motivated by pleasure? No. Should I be motivated by pain? No. Should I be motivated by fear? No. I should be motivated in the world, to move in the world, by what I call love. Again, bliss. In my experience, and this is, sort of the deepest level of my spiritual experience, it really is everything we see, the whole world, the existence, is actually just pure love. I know we don't experience it that way, so I'm not trying to gaslight you. I don't always experience it that way either. But in moments of clarity, myself and others have seen this, that, there's this sort of illusion of that there's this battle between good and evil, right and wrong. There's all this stuff going on, but it's a pure expression of love. And the best example I can give you for that is, say, a film. Let's take Lord of the Rings, because I know that the director of that film was very passionate about that project. Okay, so Lord of the Rings is a story about good and evil. It's a story where there's back and forth, battles, people dying, there's heartbreak, there's every kind of emotion and drama that you can imagine that humans can experience in this film. And yet, the film itself is an expression of pure bliss, of love. Peter Jackson was passionate about that project and making that film and that trilogy series, okay? So Lord of the Rings itself is pure love, pure passion. Depicted in the film is, love, hate, fear, everything. But the film itself is the expression of pure love. And that is the best analogy I can give for what we're experiencing here. Yes, on this plane and in one of these human suits, incarnations, we experience everything. Love, hate, fear, disappointment, triumph, back and forth all over the map. Okay? And yet, the framework, the background on which all of this plays out is an expression of pure love. Okay? So this is my best answer to the question of, can I trust my emotions? Can I trust my feelings? Should I be motivated by this or that? The answer is follow love, follow your bliss, and then use negative emotions as pointers to places inside of you where you are not allowing the light of love in fully. These are dark places where ignorance exists, where you have believed something that is ultimately not true about yourself, about others, about the world, about existence, about God, one of them or all of the above. And if you do the work, which isn't necessarily quick or easy, but if you do the work to inquire and find the confusion, that's the word I'll use, and clear up that confusion, you will see that, it's actually just all love. All right? So, as always, everyone, I hope this talk was helpful. If it was, I could really use your help. So again, becoming a patron, making a one-time donation, buying some merch, liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing. All of these things really do help, and I do need your help. Okay, everyone, until next time, namaste. Have a beautiful, beautiful day.